Good morning, everyone. I see Candy's already mentioned it's the 4th of July today. Welcome to our Sunday Reflections. In our time together today, we are going to continue working on the faith and race timeline that we've been looking at with a glance today at some of those events that started near the time of the founding of our country, around the time that the Declaration of Independence was signed and presented, which is, of course, what we commemorate today on the 4th of July. We're going to start, as usual, with a convening. So I've left the screen up, and we will move to that now. So join me. Moving less like a lone jet and more like a flock of geese. This is the way of the God of interdependence, showing us how to glide forward when it's needed and how to ease back when it's time to rest in the flow. The kindred one is like the wind that sustains our flight, making it possible to journey further together than alone. Let us embrace the gifts of God, the source of our collective power. So again, thanks for joining this morning, and we'll begin with some music from Martin. This one's a gem, and as usual, the introduction was really informative for me, and I'm so glad to have this from Martin.
John Brown's body lies a mouldering in the grave. These are the original words sung by Union soldiers during the Civil War to a tune that later became, with the poet Julia Ward Howe's lyrics, the battle hymn of the Republic. This sturdy tune can handle other lyrics as well, as was proven in the 1890s when women were marching for the right to vote and sang a version of it called the Battle Hymn of the Suffragists. The words were changed again by Union labor organizers in 1915 when they sang, instead of Glory, Glory, Hallelujah, Solidarity Forever. This is the Battle Hymn of the Republic.
Wow, that was spectacular. And I apologize for the title. Kind of made you think you're going to be listening to something different, but that was great. The Battle Hymn of the Republic, uh, just beautiful. I grew up actually celebrating July 4th. Maybe many of you did too. And my mom would always have a party, and we would listen. We would sing patriotic songs together, and we would listen to recordings of Everett Dirksen, who would read the Declaration of Independence on these, along with other things, on records. And I just got transported back into that moment there. So we'll shift gears a little now, though, and move into our opening prayer, which is on the screen in front of you, even though it says convening. I guess I had a few editing issues on this slideshow. So join me in prayer. God, who is all, our perception of the sacred around and within us is warped by the lenses through which we see, those that divide and oppress based on gender, by class, by race, by ability, by weight, and so many other divisions. Liberate our cumulative patterns, our relationships, and our spirits. May we notice in our bodies how it feels to be alive, connected, and engaged, so that we may celebrate the life we have with one another. Amen. So I mentioned that today we will be talking about faith and race, some moments from our faith and race timeline. I have 4 examples queued up. I'm not sure we'll get to all of them. We don't have a lot of time here this morning. But there are some questions, as I've been prompting for the last few weeks, and we'll have 3 more weeks of faith and race timeline before I shift out and Pastor Dan is back from his sabbatical. And I wanted to share some of the questions I'm hoping that you can consider as we go through these examples. And I'll come back to that, to these questions. So there's a couple of questions I want you to have in your mind. And if someone who's here could type these questions into the comments, that would be helpful, or not, obviously not the full content, but if you have a chance to drop those in, that would be great. So the first question is, how does Christianity and perhaps other traditions, how do Christianity and other traditions in their practices today, how do they or do they continue the types of practices that we're going to see going forward towards Indigenous people, African Americans, and other groups in the United States? So that's one question. Are there things in Christian practices today that perpetuate the kinds of things that we'll read about? And then the second one is, how do we respond? And I'm going to give you a couple frameworks as we head into this. You know, our religion and many religions have themes of forgiveness and redemption. And I wonder how that can apply as we think about the past of our ancestors, but also just our collective country, even if we can't trace our way back, and our collective religions. So we'll start there and see how it goes. And thank you, Candy, for popping those in. It's hard for me to track them all at the same time. So the first one we're going to talk about is just colonialism in general and the doctrine of discovery. So we start that in 1492. I'm going to share a photo, if I can get to the right screen here. So many things up. Here we go. Well, this is a photo from Washington, D.C. It's my daughter looking at the Washington Monument when she was much younger. and kind of this patriotic site. But let's move to the next slide. So this is Columbus arriving on Hispaniola in 1492 and greeted by Native Americans. And you can see there's kind of an exchange going on in this photo. You can see some of the goods that the Native Americans are giving. You can also see that among the first things that's in the picture is the raising of a cross in the back, kind of showing what the plan is here. Among other things, they come with weapons and with a cross. And this was a landing in an area which I'm sure many of you know this, where thousands of years had gone on with civilization. So by 8500 BC, there were 7 civilizations in the world that were domesticating plants to start agriculture, and 2 of those were in North America. And by the time the Europeans arrived at this time in 1490, there were about 40 million people living in North America prior to that time. And I think we often think about, or maybe we often hear about immigration in the United States, and maybe we think about it first in the context of enslaved people, which wasn't really an immigration, but enslaved people being brought and forced into the country, forced migration. Or we think about the Irish migration that happened in the 1800s. But clearly the Europeans who first came to the Americas in the 1400s were really the first immigrants to the continent. Now, the specific immigration that they had, and that which is pictured in this art that you see, was based on a religious mandate. And so again, you see that cross there, which was the Doctrine of Discovery. It was an official pronouncement by the Pope in 1455, and it was originally based on Portugal exploring in West Africa, but it was later expanded to basically permit any Christian nation, again under the authority of the Pope, to permit any Christian nation to seize land and colonize any non-Christian nations. So it, and I'm quoting here, specifically sanctioned and promoted the conquest, colonization, and exploitation of non-Christian territories and peoples. And its name comes from the idea that simply because of the discovery, so it's the Doctrine of Discovery, because of the discovery, Christian countries gain the right to the land that they discover, so long as it's inhabited by non-Christians. And this doctrine influenced colonization around the world for hundreds of years. Starting in the 1400s, it carried for many years after that as a justification for colonization. So that's the first stop on our timeline today. The initial colonization of the Americas. The second stop we're going to make today is also related to colonization, but over on the other side of the country near us in the missions. So this picture is in Monterey, California, so very close by, and it's showing an Ohlone, and the Ohlone are the general group of Native Americans from our area as well. And it's showing a group of Ohlones fighting a Spaniard in 1791. So I don't know which of you grew up in California, or how many of you grew up in California. I grew up in California, and I grew up just thinking that the missions were the greatest things in the world. And I saw that shifting for my kids over the range of ages of my kids. My youngest is 6 years younger than my oldest. My oldest built a mission in fourth grade, and I'm not even sure that my youngest studied missions in the fourth grade as a part of California history. And I, they did study them, but only in the context of the destructive power of missions on Native Americans, and that's what this particular topic is about. So when the Spanish came to California, they included both Franciscan missionaries, who are some of those people that I thought of as just wonders in California, but it included the Franciscan missionaries and the Spanish military. And they essentially imprisoned indigenous people and forced them into labor. And it was a part of their overall strategy to take control of California and their land and resources. Now, sometimes they would describe the way that they forced them in by saying things like, "Oh, they drew them to the missions with food, and then they weren't able to leave." But when you prevent people from having food and then you give them food in a different location, there's a lot of coercion going on in that process. And the Franciscans started to build missions in California in 1770, so right around again this time of the Declaration of Independence that we celebrate today. And as I was talking about, they initially were drawing people in somewhat voluntarily, and then once they got there, they were put to work, building the missions and tilling the fields. And over time, this process included introducing disease, which we've heard about, and damaging the initial land that used to be those of the Ohlone, which basically disrupted the ability of these tribes to operate. And eventually things were so overt that Spanish soldiers would have battles like you see here, although what I'm talking about happened later than 1791. But Spanish soldiers would battle with indigenous people, and then they would be captured, and they would deliver those whom they had captured to the priests at the missions. And at the missions, they would be forcibly baptized and then confined there as baptized members of the mission. And they were controlled in a number of ways. And this had a huge impact on the population of Native Americans in California. I'm going to move to the next slide. Go here. So I'm going to start this video going, but I want to tell you a little bit about what it's going to go through. So it's going to go through in time. This is a map of the Bay Area. And the color on the screen, the darkest red color is, and then going to lighter red, pink, and into white is the baptism rates. So the cumulative baptism rates. The brightest red are where there's no one baptized, which pretty much indicates no contact between the Native Americans and the missionaries. And when they've been fully baptized, then you won't see any red at all. It's not comprehensive, but you can see the movement rather than exactly where all of the population is. The dark spots that you'll see show movement into missions from native lands, and you'll see how this changes over time. And I'll do a little bit of a narration as it gets going. So here it goes. So of course, at the beginning, no one is baptized. So But you can see there's two missions, one in San Francisco and one in San Jose, and the Native Americans in the area are being drawn into or sent into. And you can see the depletion of the native population, which is demonstrated by the baptism rates. And note that we're right now just in the 1790s. So again, around the time of the American Revolution that was happening on the other side of the country. And you can see by now pretty much the entire native population of the peninsula has been drawn into the missions. And they've opened up an additional mission in San Jose. And now you're seeing all of the movement out of Alameda County and Contra Costa County. You can see it's almost completely transformed the population even before the start of the gold rush. The Native American population in the Bay Area has just been decimated and transformed. All right. Okay, we're running short on time, so I'm just going to briefly touch on the next two, and maybe we will talk more. Maybe we'll talk more about them, but they're also topics that we probably know more about. But I wanted to go back to those questions, and so one question, and these are kind of big questions. It'd be easier if we were in person and having this conversation. But if you have thoughts on them, I'm going to happily bring in those thoughts. So the first is, are there things that are happening today that perpetuate this type of treatment? And just to talk about the two things we saw. One was this idea that Christians or any other religion has the right to be someplace and other people don't, regardless of who was there first or anything else about them. So that was kind of the first example that we saw in with the doctrine of discovery. And then the second example that we saw was the forced conversion. So even though maybe the Spaniards felt from doctrine of discovery that they had the right to the land, they had to actually do something about it, and they kind of warped, I would say, the ideas of Christianity to give them a way to make it seem as if they were saving people in this process. So the question is, are there religious activities that are working in that same way today? So that's one, if there's anything that you know about there. And then the second one is thinking about themes of forgiveness and redemption and how that might play out as we think about things like our church sits on land that we saw there was completely taken out of the hands of Native Americans. So ways to think about that. So if you have thoughts, feel free to pop those in the chats, and thanks for doing that. So I just want to mention a couple of things, and I'm going to skip the photos and maybe we'll come back to those. So the first is slavery in America, and of course that was also happening during this time of the independence movement in the United States. It started well before and then moved into it. The vast majority of those who were enslaved and then moved to many parts of the world, but also to the United States. They were from Central and West Africa. And the first to be a part of the slave trade were the Portuguese, but many other European countries followed. And it was a horrific system that fueled the economy of the early United States. And of course, there's a legacy of this system today. And the last thing that I wanted to mention was directly related to the Declaration of Independence. And I'm going to mention this also in my this part of it in my sermon at the 11 o'clock service. The original Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776, and it's actually a few days before July 4th. But why quibble with the exact date? And I think I mentioned this at the beginning of our time together, that really July 4th, Independence Day, was not really the day of the United States becoming independent, but the day of the United States declaring its intention to become independent. And I actually kind of like thinking about it more in that way, because independence in our country has really been more of a process than a moment in time. And one of the things that makes that clear is this, the writing of the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson wrote the first draft, and then a group of people came together to edit it before they would sign it. And there were a few key changes that were made in his draft, and they're all pretty interesting what they chose to change. But I think that the thing that's what makes me think about what might have been, but also is kind of the largest change, is there's a section in the Declaration of Independence, if you haven't read it recently, where they talk about all the terrible things that King George of England has done, and the things that they would like to do differently, and how they would like to escape from that terrible tyranny. And the paragraph, this long paragraph that got changed and taken out completely, actually didn't make it in any way. It started out like this. It said, he, meaning King George, has waged cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere, or to incur miserable death in their transportation. This piratical warfare, the opprobrium of infidel powers, is the warfare of the Christian king of Great Britain, determined to keep open a market where men should be bought and sold. And then it continues basically with all of this criticism of slavery. And, there's a lot of ironies there, one of which is that Thomas Jefferson himself owned slaves and benefited from the practice of slavery in the United States. But that portion was removed because they needed to get South Carolina and Georgia into their consortium. And then Thomas Jefferson wrote later that he actually thought that those in the North probably supported removing it too, because they weren't quite ready to make that stand. So it's another moment of struggling with how to make sense of the things that are so powerful, a part of our society, but also so incredibly wrong and painful. So I'm going to close us off here. And thanks for those who have put in some thoughts. Yeah, Candy, thank you. Thank you for putting those in. And if anyone else has thoughts on these topics, feel free to pass those on. So I'm going to take a break here and move to our announcements, and then we'll go to our closing before we end for today. So first, you've heard over the last few weeks about our administrative manager, Skip Ordway, who's been here for 13 years and is retiring and has retired. On Sunday, August 1st, which will also be Pastor Dan's first day back from his sabbatical, we're going to have a going away reception for him, and hope you all can be a part of that, if not in person, then virtually. And if you'd like to participate in a retirement gift, you can write a check with Skip in the memo and send it to the church or leave in the offering box. We have a new administrative manager, Felicia. I look forward to meeting her. She just earned her master's degree in theology from the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley. So I think that'll help her out working here. And she'll be starting on July 6th, so just a couple days. Those of you in our worship service last week have heard about a renewed commitment to giving to the food bank of Contra Costa and Solano counties. We have 2 barrels now in the main hall, and I encourage you to bring donations of non-perishable food items like peanut butter, cereals, and pasta and canned items. If you go on the website of the Food Bank of Contra Costa and Solano, you can do that, and then you can get some good ideas for other things that they might need. And you just need to be sure that you're not donating things that either don't have an expiration date or have an expiration date that has passed. So you want to make sure that you're bringing in things that they can use. Finally, good news on our worship and music programs, and including support for Martin, our music director here. You may know that there was a challenge to try to raise money to fill the gap in our budget, and I see here that the challenge to match was met by over 150%. So thanks to any and all of you who contributed to that. So wonderful to be able to keep all of our music in place. All right, we're going to finish with our benediction before we end. And thanks so much for being here and sharing a part of your July 4th with us. You are welcome to join for a Bible study, and would look forward to having you. It's at our, you can get the link, I believe, on the website or in the email that you received earlier this week. Otherwise, I will also be at the 11 o'clock service with the rest of the team. So look forward to seeing you wherever we see you again. And now in benediction, thank God we have each other, that we can connect in our earthy bodies on this curvy landscape of existence, that we can gaze at the stars and dream into being the compassionate realities we desperately desire. Go forth, you interdependent part of the beautiful, heartbreaking whole. It is for freedom that we set one another free.